For our message today, we have two texts, two verses that seemingly at first don't really go together. But if I do my job right, you'll see that they have a very strong connection. The first passage is found in Luke chapter 9, verse 58. And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." And then we turn over to John chapter 19, and we read verse 30. So when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, "It is finished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. And may God bless the reading of his word today. The man, after having driven all night long, non-stop, pulled over into a city park to get some much-needed rest and sleep. He didn't know it, but that park was a very popular place for people to jog, especially early in the morning. So just as the man got settled down in the back seat of his vehicle, blanket pulled up over him, all snuggled up, cuddled up, warm and comfortable, and just about the time he went off to sleep, he heard a pecking on his window. He raised up, and it was a jogger. And the jogger's there jogging at his window. And he says, "Sir, could you give me the time?" And the guy looked at his watch, rubbed his eyes. "Yeah, it's 8:15. Thank you." So he laid back down, got comfortable, and just about the time he dozed off again, he heard another pecking on his window. It was another jogger. And the jogger's jogging, "Do you have the time?" And the guy said, "Yeah, it's 8:30. Off he went. Guy laid back down, gets comfortable again. Just about the time he dozes off, you guessed it, more pecking on his window. He looks up, there's another jogger. The jogger says, "Sir, do you have the time?" He gritted his teeth, "Yeah, it's 8:45, and off he went. Now by now, the guy realizes I've got to do something different if I'm going to get any rest. So he took out a pencil and paper, and he wrote a note, and he stuck it up on his window. It said, "I do not know what time it is." And then he laid back down, got all comfortable, and about the time he dozed off to sleep, there's more pecking on his window. He raised up, and there was another jogger. He says, "What do you want?" And the jogger says, "Sir, I just stopped to tell you it's 9 o'clock. No rest for the weary. No rest for the weary. Well, I tell that little story because the same truth applied to Jesus during his time here on earth. That is, there was no rest for the weary. In the verse in Luke, Jesus makes the statement that he had nowhere to lay his head. Now, the word he uses there for lay his head literally means to rest, to get some rest. So Jesus is literally saying that he had found no place to get any rest. Now, I'm going to give you a list of some of the things that Jesus did during his time here. And while these things were marvelous and magnificent in every way, none of these things gave him rest. None of these things gave him a place to lay his head. And then we'll close our message with the one thing that gave him rest. The one place on this earth that gave him a place to lay his head. First of all, let's note his choosing. The choosing of his disciples. When Jesus chose those 12 men to make up the greatest team ever assembled, when he chose those 12 men to be his partners in his ministry, to be his closest and constant companions, I'm sure that brought Jesus joy and pleasure to have his team assembled. But a place to lay his head? Real rest? No. Those 12 men did not give him that. And then we look at the changing that Jesus did. He changed water into wine in a wedding, and he went about changing people's lives. Now, obviously, all this changing brought a lot of joy and happiness to a lot of people. This changing helped a lot of people, and I'm sure it brought Jesus a great deal of satisfaction. But all this changing, be it water into wine or be it a person's life, all of that changing brought Jesus no rest. Did not give him a place to lay his head. And then thirdly, we note his caring. As you know, Jesus cared for the downcast, for the downtrodden, for people that nobody else cared about. People like prostitutes and tax collectors and the like. Now, Jesus caring for these people brought these people a great deal of happiness and joy. And I'm sure it brought Jesus happiness and joy. But a place to lay his head? Real rest? No. All of his caring did not bring that about. And then we note his catering. Jesus catered to the hunger of people. On more than one occasion, he fed hordes of people, thousands of people. People who were hungry, without food, and in need of food. And clearly, while this brought fulfillment to a lot of people, and I'm sure it brought fulfillment to Christ, all of that feeding and catering did not give Jesus any rest. Did not give him a place to lay his head. And then we note his curing. As you well know, Jesus cured people of diseases. He cured people of demons, and he even cured people of death. He did this many times with many people, lots of times with lots of folks. And obviously all this curing brought joy and pleasure to many people's lives and to Christ himself. But all of his curing did not give him a place to lay his head. All of his curing did not give him real rest. And then there was his calming and controlling. As we know, on more than one occasion, Jesus would calm storms and control even nature. But even this awesome display of power and strength on the part of Christ, even this did not bring him real rest. All of his calming and controlling did not give him a place to lay his head. And then we have his communicating. Through his teaching and preaching, Jesus communicated the greatest truths ever communicated. He gave teachings that are matchless and magnificent. Teachings that are timeless in their truth. Teachings that apply to all people of all time. But did his marvelous teaching and preaching give him a place to lay his head? Did his wonderful communicating give him real rest? No, it did not. And then we note his clearing of the temple. When Jesus went to God's house, and instead of finding a house of prayer and worship, he found a bank and a business going on, he cleared the temple. He grabbed a whip and literally cleared the temple of all those greedy money grubbers. And while this brought him justice and righteousness, this did not give him a place to lay his head. It did not give him real rest. Well, all of this, marvelous, magnificent, wonderful, but none of it gave him a place to lay his head. None of it gave him real rest. But now we come to what Jesus did that finally gave him a place to lay his head. The one thing that gave him real rest, and it was his completing of his mission. Now we go to John's verse. In John's verse, Jesus said, "It is finished." Okay? And then John adds, Jesus bowed his head and gave up his spirit. Now, the word Jesus used for bowing his head, guess what? Is the very same word Jesus used back in the verse in Luke when he said he didn't have a place to lay his head. Do you see what's happened now? Jesus finally now has a place to lay his head. Jesus finally now has found real rest. And where was the one place in the world that he found a place to lay his head? Right there. Right there. Think of it. The creator of the world had no place to lay his head in the entire world except on a bloody cross. Now, folks, that's a Savior. That's a Savior. He found no place in this world that he created to find any rest until he climbed up on a cruel, bloody cross. Do you see the wondrous truth here? Jesus got no rest. He would not rest. He could not rest until he had done everything necessary to give you and me a way to be saved. And then and only then would he lay his head down. Then and only then would he finally know real rest. What a scene. What a Savior. One place to lay his head. One place to find rest. And of all places, it was a cross. The last place we would lay our head. The last place we would find any rest was the only place he would lay his head. The only place he would find real rest. And folks, because he laid his head on the cross, we can lay our soul in his hands. Because he found rest on the cross, we can find rest in and with him for all of eternity. Finally, on the cross, he got to rest. Finally, on the cross, he got to lay that precious head down. Again, I say to you, congregation, that's a Savior. That's a Savior. And I thank God that that's the kind of Savior that you and I have. What a Savior.